What meagre money I had left, I scraped together to pay for the airfare from the UK and accepted a summer job in America. The only job the agency had left was delivering phone books in Manhattan. But lugging phone books up and down skyscrapers for 2 weeks wasn't exactly what Tony and I had in mind when we applied for our student work visas. The job wouldn't pay enough to support ourselves for the summer. And besides, we wanted to go to San Francisco. I was going to see an American friend I'd picked up hitchhiking in the UK the year before. It was 1971, and like most European youth at the time, Haight-Ashbury was the place to go. It was the heart of the counterculture, and underground music, alternative lifestyles, political and artistic expression. And of course, we had more than a passing interest in the drug culture. After a few hours' sleep and a quick breakfast, we went to the Greyhound station. "See the USA. Leave the driving to us," the ad said between a queue of happy, shining people, eager to get on that bus. "San Francisco, here we come." We didn't have a bloody idea how far it was or how long it'd take us to get there. As we approached the counter and saw the fares, our jaws dropped. We hadn't budgeted for this. Shit, we didn't even have a budget. But that wasn't going to stop us. We told the clerk how much money we had and asked him how far we could go. "That'd be Cheyenne, Wyoming, son." It was obvious we had no idea where it was. But we anteed up most of the cash we had and bought 2 one-way tickets, leaving precious little money to support ourselves for the next 3 months. "Bloody hell, Tony, how far is this Cheyenne?" Tony had gone to one of those upper-class English boarding schools, and he seemed to know most things. "It's almost 2,000 miles to Cheyenne, and so at the rate we're traveling, it should take us about 48 hours, I estimate." He said it in a most sagely accent, completely unfazed by the prospect. His self-confident, superior attitude irritated me. But in this strange country, expanding exponentially before my eyes, he seemed to be the only person in America that I could talk to without being asked to repeat myself. Or told I had a cute accent. And I didn't even know I had an accent. The mountains in Pennsylvania were completely covered in trees, absolutely massive compared to the British hillsides I'd left behind. Dropping out of the mountains, we crossed over long bridges, crossing wide rivers. And then we were surrounded by the endless flatlands and the biggest cornfields I'd ever seen, stretching to the horizon in every single direction. Everything in America seemed so vast, including this bloody bus ride. As the sun set on the second bone-aching day, a rugged-looking character with a toothless grin leaned across the aisle, and he started a conversation. We told him we were going to Cheyenne. "Where are y'all going to work?" he asked. When we told him we didn't have any jobs and had spent as much as we had on the bus fare, he was really surprised. I think he feared for our safety, or perhaps our sanity. "Y'all should turn in your tickets at the next stop. Greyhound will refund your fare, and you can use that unused portion of your fare to spend while you're looking for work. You're going to need that money where you're looking for work, son." The next city was Omaha, Nebraska. Next to the bus station, there was a rundown hotel, which had some cheap rooms. There were some pretty nasty stains in our room. But despite that, and the drunks outside, we got a good night's sleep. In the morning, we found a flat with a young guy who explained awkwardly that he'd just got out of Boys Town. We shook hands and agreed to move in the next day. It was only later that we learned that Boys Town was some sort of juvenile detention center. We started looking for work and soon found out that most of the good summer jobs had already been taken. I ended up driving an ice cream truck for the Delight Ice Cream Company. I actually had to wear a cap that said Mr. Delight. What the hell were they thinking? I felt like some kind of gigolo. People liked my accent and they wanted to hear me talk, which made me feel a bit like a traveling freak show. They'd ask me if I'd met the Queen. Did I know James Bond? Or was I in an English rock band? I actually convinced some kids I used to play with the Rolling Stones. I don't think they got that many English visitors in Omaha, to tell the truth. The crazy thing was driving on the other side of the road. The truck was a stick shift, and using my right hand to change gears was a bloody nightmare. Somehow I managed to avoid hitting anything or anyone the whole summer. My route was way out in the suburbs, and you had to drive a lot of miles in comparison to the ice cream you sold. No matter how early I started, or how late I stayed out after dark, once they deducted gas money, I got next to nothing. It could have been below minimum wage for all I knew. After paying for food and rent, there wasn't much left. It was bloody obvious this job wasn't going to pay enough to get me to San Francisco. I was getting tired of Omaha. Tony's pompous attitude had finally got on my nerves, and we had seriously fallen out. Lying awake one night, I decided to quit that job and leave with what money I had. I was going to hitchhike to San Francisco on my own. I got up early, pulled on my backpack with my Union Jack prominently displayed, and quietly left the house. When I reached the interstate, it was bloody hot, and there was no shade. But I didn't care. It just felt brilliant to be there with my thumb out on my way to San Francisco. After a while, a cop car screeched to a halt right next to me, and a big cop got out. I could see my image in his sunglasses as he looked down at me. He asked me if I was a vagrant, ominously resting his right hand on his gun. He spat on the ground, narrowly missing my backpack, and said, "Hitchhiking ain't legal in Nebraska. Gotta get off of this rant right now." I was speechless. I just stood there, utterly flabbergasted. How the hell was I supposed to know it was illegal to hitchhike in Nebraska? How was I going to get to San Francisco? "Y'all speak English?" I was tempted to tell him that his was not the Queen's English. But I thought better of it. Obediently, I pulled on my backpack and started walking down the ramp. "Where are you headed, son?" he asked, kind of paternally, but he still had his hand on that gun. "San Francisco, but I haven't got any money, and now you say I can't hitchhike." "Listen, son." I was starting to get tired of people calling me son. "Why don't you head over to them railroad yards? It ain't legal neither, but half them railroad guys have rode the rails. They'll help you." I looked up, and I almost hugged him. But he still had that gun, and I didn't want to create any misunderstanding. I cautiously approached a workman in the railroad yards and asked him if any of these trains were going to San Francisco. He casually pointed to a train, which he said was leaving that day. And he added there were some clean cars at the back. I thanked him, and he gave me a big smile, like he was pleased to have another satisfied customer. America, I was learning, has an infinite capacity to surprise. I climbed in the car and made myself comfortable, not knowing what to expect. After a while, I fell asleep dreaming about San Francisco and the West Coast. But I woke with a start when the train began to move, and I saw two guys running alongside throw their bags into the car and climb in. One was a runaway with a stash of marijuana he generously shared. The other said he was a professor. He drank copious amounts of wine without ever getting drunk. We talked a lot over the next couple of days. My life in the UK was as alien and interesting to them as theirs was to me. The train crossed snow-capped mountains, dense forests, and small western towns where people waved to us at railroad crossings, and then onto the desert. One evening I was high watching the sunset. The desert was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I was assailed by a riot of color. Not the primary colors of the rainbow, but the pastel shades of peach, vermilion, saffron, lavender, colors that changed imperceptibly as the sun set in that big sky. Suddenly, the train jolted to a halt. High as a kite, I jumped out of that boxcar and sprang across the tracks to be at one with the desert. Dancing like an idiot, I noticed my companions waving from the boxcar, and I merrily waved back. They were telling me to come back, but I wasn't ready to go back. Then I saw them frantically pointing down the track, and it suddenly struck me. There was another incredibly long train coming down the track alongside my train, the very track that I just jumped across. I had moments to get back before I was cut off from this monster, stranded in the searing sun. "Fucking hell!" I yelled, running towards my companions. I was getting closer, but so too was the oncoming train. I ran faster. The driver hooted, warning me I wasn't going to make it. The train whooshed past, separating me from my boxcar, my backpack, and everything I needed to survive. Food, money, passport, water. I was literally left for toast. Through the passing cars, I could see my train hadn't moved. But it could leave at any moment, I thought quickly, and started running in the direction that my train would take when it left. But that endless train took a long lifetime to pass. Then, finally, in the distance, like the cavalry coming to rescue me, I could see the caboose emerging out of the gloom, and I knew I was going to be okay and make it back to my car. I got as far as Sacramento on that train, and I hitchhiked the rest of the way to San Francisco. I called my American friend and found out he lived on a commune. When I got there, we hung out night after night, listening to music, smoking weed, and talking with his friends about changing the world and the coming revolution. All of them were active in the peace movement. Their prized trophy was an empty tear gas canister they'd picked up at a demonstration, which had been fired at them. They used it as an incense burner. When I bitched about my job at the ice cream company, they told me those capitalist pigs had ripped me off by charging more for gas than they paid for it. That's what the system does, man. It fucks you up. But I didn't really care about the system or the job. I'd made it to San Francisco. I'd seen Haight-Ashbury, and I was experiencing the counterculture close up. Thank you.
That's his first time on the VAMP stage, Ken Grimes.